All right, Tom, the big meeting that was going to happen didn't happen, and you kind of wonder what's next. They're going to just forget about this whole thing. I know they're scheduled to talk on the phone, but what do you think?
Yeah, let's just call the whole thing off. I couldn't believe the reason that was given, that it wasn't sure that the plane from Ottawa to Montreal.
Yeah.
So just to give you an idea, the drive on the highway between those two airports is on really driving slowly, prudently, 2 hours. Snowstorm, maybe 2.5. I did a couple of 100 kilometers today during the storm, and it wasn't the worst storm we've ever seen, and everybody was driving 90. Everybody's being super careful. No accidents to report.
90.
I drove. And so Mr. Trudeau, who has like the world's largest motorcade, couldn't have taken that and come and seen Francois Legault. He had to say that he was going to get on the plane, but they told him it wasn't sure that the plane would be able to land in Montreal. Even the idea of, this is the COP15, biodiversity, environment. How do you go from Ottawa to Montreal? Oh, I take a big plane. What? So on just about every level, it was wrong. But yes, they're saying that they're going to try to set another date, and I hope they do, because there are big, important topics like healthcare that everybody's expecting them to deal with.
Surprised that Drake wouldn't have lent them his helicopter or whatever. So just so much easier that way.
It's so wimpy. Like and I hate to say, I mean, it's not fair. I suppose they're trying to be safe and all that, but nonetheless, the perception to me is like, oh, you wusses. Like, come on, put on your snow boots and your cross-country skis and your toque.
Well, no, it's so, you're so harsh, Natasha.
Yeah.
I mean, when was the last time you saw 10 inches of snow in December in Canada? Come on,
Tom, it's got to be at least a year.
A rare event.
It's not like it happens every year. Can't blame them.
It's unbelievable.
Okay.
Really, I started going, okay, like, you didn't want to have the meeting, fine, but really, you can't take your plane from Ottawa to Montreal. Oh, dear.
Could have taken a bus. I think that would have been a whole
lied.
lot better.
They should have said one of them had a sore throat or something. They should have had a better excuse than that.
Yeah,
anyway.
That's it. All right. Let's move on from that. Can I bring up the anthem? I know you brought this up earlier in the week, and I said today when I asked it as a question, I don't think we paid enough attention to this, and I think that's our fault. When I say our, maybe the media's fault, for not having really noticed what's going on in that committee over Bill C-13. I played a clip from Anthony House Father becoming rather impassioned when talking about Anglophone rights and protecting them. We're going to have him on the show in about 20 minutes. What do you make of what you've heard so far from him and from Marc Garneau?
Well, I think that Garneau was singularly courageous this week when he went after this issue, because he's been following it closely, and it's not his background. He's not a lawyer, but he's really drilled down. He's met with a lot of people in the community. He's made his business to become more than acquainted, to become an expert on these issues. And what he's seeing in C-13 is really worrying him. And he's right. And Anthony's in there. I mean, he's not a member of the committee, but he's been helping draft amendments and doing his best to try to right this thing. But C-13 really is dangerous, and I always go back to the same example, just because people need an example, and it's control and management of the school boards. You know, Section 23 of the Charter of Rights doesn't talk about the right to send your kids to an English school. It talks about the right to have your kid educated in what the terms were much wider. It was like in establishments, institutions of the linguistic minority. And that was interpreted by the courts as going beyond the school building. It included school boards. And that is in danger, because the way the definitions are going to be torqued, really the only minority, the language minority in Canada, could be interpreted as being the French minority. And of course, that's a simple demographic and geographic and historic fact. There's one of the two languages, one is the minority language across the country. That's only fair. But at the same time, there are things that are important in there. I think of access to health and social services. Who gets to define what's the community look like? And the way they're throwing it in, there are references in their holus bolus that were asked for by the CAC government to make C-13 harmonize with Bill 96. And I think that there's a lot of danger in that, because Bill 96 has not been paid enough attention to in terms of the detailed effect that it has. So the English-speaking community of Quebec is being, right now, caricatured. Oh, well, it's because you think that the English in Quebec have it as hard as the French in Manitoba. No, that's not the issue. The issue is whether or not the community here, that is about 1 million strong, similar to the population of Manitoba, whether or not they're going to continue to have access to health and social services. Who defines who gets that access? That's the type of thing we should be discussing.
Can I just ask what you think then? You mentioned Marc Garneau just now being, courageous in bringing this up. You know the quote from Francois Legault? I heard Marc Garneau, Monsieur Garneau, I have the impression he doesn't understand.
Sure. I mean, it's dismissive because what Legault always boils this down to, and they use the same formula all the time. Oh, all the lights on the dashboard are red. Oh, all the signals are red. They're always saying that. Oh, everything is bad. Everything's horrible. Well, here's a fact that 90% of the people in the greater Montreal area, the census area, which is over 4 million people, 90% of them can hold a conversation in French. That's really high compared to anything historic. The young people today who are parents and some becoming grandparents went through the French school system. If they were immigrants, new arrivals, and kids who were in the English side, most of them were in immersion, and many English parents decided to send their kids straight into French school.
Yes.
So somehow they're turning this into it's almost as if none of that history happened over the past 50 years. And these guys are still putting on their boots in the morning saying, oh, this is 1972. We better go out there and have the same fight using the same arguments. And it doesn't make any sense. But it's a bit disappointing to see that there's no articulation of a counter-argument anywhere to be seen in the community. Quebec Community Group Network does, a one-shot gun. They have 500 people sign a letter, but then there's no follow-up. There's no plan. There's no articulation of, well, how do we sit down and discuss this so that the feds understand C-13 is a problem, and that Legault stops making it into a joke and understands that there are things in 96 that are of legitimate concern to the English-speaking community of Quebec.
You know, we heard from a caller earlier, Jamie, who was saying her daughter, so she was born in 1973, and her daughter has been, so she's not eligible for her kids to go to English school. Her daughter's been in the French school, is about to graduate from high school this year, and has always planned on going to an English CJAD.
Of course.
And she's distraught beyond belief, the mom and the daughter. And the mom is like, I made a promise to my kid that I no longer can keep. How can she not have the choice of how she wants to be educated at this point?
What's going to happen to a lot of young people, like your friend's daughter, is they're just going to look up. They'll take their plane from Dorval to Ottawa, and they'll go to places like Carleton or Ottawa U or some of the community colleges that are there, like Algonquin, and they're just going to say hasta, vista. So these are people who could have been contributing to Quebec because they've got both languages, they've got good training, they've got tons of smarts. And more people are going to, you've heard the expression quiet quitting. Mm-hmm. People just leaving a job without making a fuss, and it doesn't turn into a big court battle, just slowly but surely, toning it down and just walking away from it. That's what I'm hearing more and more. There are letters sometimes get published in the Gazette, but it's in the community. It's people I talk to and just saying, I'm packing it in. I've been here through thick and thin for the past 50 years since this started. I've always said, be understanding. You've got to be able to be open and respect the other side and understand that they have legitimate concerns. But the legitimate concerns of the English-speaking community are the object of derision. Oh, so you're saying that, you have it worse off than the French in Ontario. No, we don't have to work towards a lowest common denominator. And yes, the community that's here has built institutions that it's proud of, but doesn't mean that you have to start knocking them down.
Tom, we're going to run out of time. I want really quickly, because we haven't talked a lot about since it began, COP15 is winding down. What's your assessment been of what's been accomplished there so far?
Well, accomplished not that much, but the coming together with the understanding of what needs to be done, that is in and of itself something important. They haven't got that many results to put on the table. There is not yet a Montreal agreement like the Paris Accord on climate change. But very similar to climate change, the countries that have the most work to do. So if you look at the production of greenhouse gases, countries like India is still very high up there. Per capita, Canada is actually one of the worst in the world, but we don't have that much of population. The global south, to use that expression, most of the countries that still have a lot of development to do are in the southern hemisphere. And it's not a 100% rule, but it's generally the rule. And they're saying, okay, on biodiversity, it's a little bit like climate change. You're telling us that we shouldn't be developing as fast as you did and making the same mistakes as you? Fine. Pony up some cash, help us develop our economies differently, and then the result will be there for the whole world. But don't tell us that we can't develop by burning coal to have electricity, that sort of thing, because you've messed it up for the past 200 years since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Same thing with regard to biodiversity. The poorer nations are in the southern hemisphere, but the vast bulk of the biodiversity, the diversity of life and nature on the planet, is also in the south. So we're telling a lot of those countries, oh, well, look, you've got the Amazon, and you're producing all this oxygen, and you're the lungs of the planet. You can't do anything with that. Well, they're sort of going, well, no, this is how we want our economy to develop, the same way you developed yours by cutting down trees and everything as you went across Canada and the United States. So don't tell us that we can't develop. Tell us that you want to help us develop differently and preserve biodiversity. We're there, but that means you're going to give us some money. And that's, unfortunately, where the thing is breaking down, because the sums involved, what would be required is way above what any of the developed countries are putting on the table. Canada's being good, though, I have to say, Aaron and Natasha. Trudeau has, stepped up to the plate on this one, as he did on climate change. Canada is one of the few countries that said they would put money on the table, and that actually did put the money on the table.
Tom Mulcair, there you go.